Tryggvason. Valbert skorar! Valbert Gunnarsson hefur skorað. Ragnar Bergjesson er skot og mark! Glæsilega! Óskar Rafn á móti Bjarna. Og Bjarni með góða sendingu fyrir og Haraldur Ingvarsson!
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Besta pod ever. This is our 9th episode, and we are coming to you fresh after the games from round 17. 2 games today just wrapped up, so we've got some hot takes and some fresh views on what's going on. And we're excited to kind of delve in here. So once again, I am joined by my companion Tryggvi. Tryggvi, how are you today?
Not great, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, it was a rough day for Tryggvi today. We'll discuss that in a second. Lots going on in the league. Transfer window has opened. We briefly touched on that last episode, and there's been a lot more. I don't know. I don't think you want to call it drama, but there's definitely been some developments with a certain club that one of us supports in terms of transfers and whatnot. So we're gonna take a look at that in a later part in the pod. But to kick things off, we're gonna go through the last week and the results that took place both in the league and also in Europe. We'll talk a little bit about that. And Tryggvi has a fun opportunity coming up on Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope I haven't gotten the dates wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. I'm pretty sure he's going to the Parken to see the second leg of the Breidablik FC Copenhagen tie. So that's really exciting. I'm super jealous.
I'll send pictures.
Yes, and we're hoping to grab some audio from that game as well, which will be fun.
Sure.
All right. So earlier in the week, there was one midweek game which took place the same day that we recorded the last episode, actually, but we finished recording halfway through the game, and so in the end, it ended Stjarnan 4 from 0. And another really impressive performance from Stjarnan. They're really firing on all cylinders, and maybe we should just tie in the next game as well, since it had to do with Stjarnan also. But a couple days later, on Saturday, they tied Breidablik 1-1. So 2 really positive results, I think, for the club, especially considering they've lost, several key players, one which was announced in the last couple of days. We'll talk about that in the other section, in the transfer section. But we both had this Stjarnan game on Wednesday. That was an impressive performance. And then you were able to catch most of the Breidablik game on Saturday. So, yeah, give us the scoop.
Yeah, I think it was the worst possible game for Breidablik to be playing. In between the FCK games. It was a Stjarnan team. It was a very typical Stjarnan performance. They just ran at Breidablik non-stop, whether it was from attack, midfield, or defense. They didn't let them have a moment's peace. And there was a lot of rotation in the Stjarnan team, and Akertaron was, they say, injured. I don't know if it had anything to do with the transfer rumors. And then, like you said, some other players missing because of transfer injuries. And then, just general rotation. So I think, before the game, you could have easily thought, okay, this is at least for the taking, but no. I think Stjarnan may be disappointed not to come out with a win.
Yeah, I think from everything that you've told me and some of the things that I've read, it certainly sounds like that. And yeah, I'm nicknaming them now the Star Factory. Like they just, it's really impressive how they just really keep going, right? And they don't really seem to miss Isak Andri or now Guma, who's left for Sweden too much, right? Robert Frosty came in, he scored his first goal for the club. I mean, he's been getting minutes this season anyways, but he hadn't scored a goal yet, and then he comes in against Fram and scores his first goal, which is exciting. And like you said, Igor Aaron is still around. For how long, I guess we don't really know, but a quality player. And then you've got another player like Gunnar Ori who's waiting in the wings, right? And the club just continues to find these and produce these players that are seemingly able to step in and just really take over without any issues. And I think that's really impressive. They really took it to from start to finish in that whole game. They just completely dismantled them, which ended up with Jan Svensson sacked from. So he is no longer a coach, which I think, and you can, give us your insight on this as well, but that seemed like a difficult decision for the club to make, at least from what they were telling us outwardly. Maybe it wasn't such a difficult decision. Maybe it was something they've been mulling over for a while, but he's almost like a legend at the club, right? He's been there since 2018. So he's been there for a while now. He took the club from, the lower divisions and brought it back into the top division. And so, he's got a Fromm heart, I guess you can say. And so I think that was a tough decision for the club to make.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's just, it came to a point, like you said, this is round 17. And they're starting to get sucked into this relegation battle. Like there's still a ton of games left with the split coming up. But I mean, IBVF and Fylkir are not exactly showing fantastic things, and they're still, getting sucked below them now. A few points below both of those, and then Hauka and Kawa are pulling away a little bit above that. So it definitely got to a point where they had to make a decision either to stick with him or change, I think. And it's from again what they were saying outwardly, there's been no discussions with any other manager. He also did sort of say there's always discussions in the background, and I think that's very true in Iceland. I think people are always talking. There's been some names linked, some old heads and some new kids on the block. We'll see if right now it's an old Icelandic international, Ragnar Sigurðsson, the defender. He's managing the team now with the director of football. Fram are saying they haven't decided anything. There's a chance that those two continue with the team for the near future. But because it's not that different of a team from last season. There's some changes, but it's not like Keflavik, who had their complete spine ripped out. It's a pretty similar team, and that was sort of the Sputnik team of last season, and now they're really struggling. So something needed to happen.
Yeah, I think it was really good timing too, and maybe planned slightly because they had this week off after that midweek game against Stjarnan. They have a week off to kind of, get their house in order a little bit. And so maybe, this was the right time to make that move so they can kind of regroup and look to try to get back on track. Like, they don't have another game until the weekend, this upcoming weekend. So, yeah, it's about, 9-10 days to see if they can get things going.
It's even after the weekend, isn't it? Isn't it the 8th next Tuesday? So they have
There you go, yeah. So it's even longer.
Yeah.
We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see if they can kind of turn it around, because you're right. Like, they're really in risk of losing touch from kind of this middle chunk where nobody can really seem to get ahead. It's a giant mosh pit in the middle of the league right now, but they are kind of dropping out slightly. So they'll want to find a way to get back in.
Maybe just very quickly on Stjarnan, like I think it's very impressive that these are two very different games. Fairly dominant performance against Fram, and then, like I said, rotating and coming up against Breiðablik, who we'll touch on a bit later, on the other two top 3 teams in the league, who seem to just be able to roll over. Like, these top 3 teams, for the most part, seem to be able to roll over the rest.
Yeah.
The rest of the league, sort of go away to a team like that with some rotation at least, just a few days later, and turn in a completely different performance, I think is really impressive. And I think so. We've said this whole season that, and I think you asked me last week as well, where do we think Stjarnan is going? Yeah, I still maybe I'm being still a bit too cautious. I still don't want to say that they're gonna go on and win the league, but no, I mean, if they can, they have some winnable games coming up in the next few rounds, so I don't see them being a crazy shout for top 6 at this point.
It's going to be close. I think it's going to be really close. In my opinion, it's between them and Kaur, I think, for that 6th place before the split. So, Yeah, let's move on to Kawa Haukau. So again, wasn't able to catch this game, but I believe you did. And from what I could tell, it was a very exciting game.
Yeah, it started off with a bang. Dusan Berkovic sent off after 2 minutes, something like that. We put a poll on Twitter asking if people agreed that it was a penalty. I think it was a pretty overwhelming result that people agreed that it was a penalty. Maybe it wasn't the biggest in the world. It was sort of the striker was dragged down right outside the area. So not the greatest start for Kawa, but to be very honest, coming out after this game, I'm far more impressed with Kawa than I am with Haukau after this game. It's if you look at the stats, Haukau had much more of the shots, and Christian Yayalo, we shouldn't take it away from him, that he had a pretty good game in goal. He was, I think he was very solid, and not just saves, but just coming out and gathering the ball and keeping a decent control of it. But it just seemed it seemed like a very controlled performance, and very often it didn't seem like there were a man, sort of a 10-man team, especially against sort of this kamikaze Haukau team. You could imagine if you're 10 men against that, you would be running into some problems. But I think Haukau were just a little bit blunt. They eventually, Kawa went ahead, some really nice play. Then the new kid, Jon Simon, showed what the commentators called a magic touch throughout the game, and he actually started the attack with a pretty nice pass to cut open the midfield, and then it was
Jakob Snar.
Jakob Snar, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
showed good feet to get past the defender, and that's sort of maybe a slightly off balance shot, but a pretty nice shot into the top corner. And yeah, to be honest, if it had ended 1-0 for Kawa, I wouldn't have been super surprised. But Haukau, rare bit of bad defending from Kawa in a free kick where Ahmed Faka, one of your star boys, with a pretty nice header to secure a draw for Haukau. But I think Haukau should come out of this result feeling a bit disappointed not to be able to take more advantage of a tired Kawa team.
Yeah.
But again, this is not the sort of game that Kawa would have wanted in between their two games with Dundalk.
Yeah, really tricky tie, right? I mean, yeah, I'm just looking through some of the stats, and obviously Kawa was a man down. So 64-36 possession in favor of Haukau. 14 shots from Haukau to 8 by Kawa. Accurate passes, 419 for Haukau, 185 for Kawa. So that's...
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, the Haukau had more of the ball, and I think they maybe struggled a little bit with this not being able to... They definitely like to be on the counter a bit, like we'll talk about later, like Valur against Kauer. There are some teams that just like to be on the counter, that like to, just attack with fast wingers.
Yeah.
And I think they just sort of struggle a little with Örvar and Hasanyala, two fast forwards who can really cause teams a lot of forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just struggle to keep position and not be the sort of the team on the back foot, I think. So yeah, and Kawa didn't. I think they struggled a little bit to create chances with being a man down, but I think overall, I think they played better.
Yeah, we should maybe mention Kawa's result in Europe. They won 3-1 in the first leg against Dundalk. Probably a little bit of an easier tie than maybe their last opponent. I don't know if you want to say that, but I've seen a couple people kind of reference that Dundalk is maybe not as good of a team. So they put themselves in a really strong position going into the second leg, which I think is positive. And again, like, part of it's the draw, I guess, luck of the draw, but also, as we mentioned in the last show, I did not think that Kawa would even make it this far in Europe, and so I think it's fantastic. I'm really happy for them, and if I'm not mistaken, they're lined up. If they progress past this tie, then I think they're playing the winner of Club Brugge and AGF. That's right, yeah. Which either of those teams is gonna be tough, but it'll be fun to have them, come visit Iceland, right? I think those will be some big ties and will be attractive to a lot of people to go check out.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think Club Brugge was leading 3-0 after the first leg, so AGF is... I'd be very surprised if it's AGF that plays Kawa.
Yeah.
But you never know.
It's true. All right. That's Kawa How Cow. Again, that ended 1-1. Also, the other game that day, yesterday, going on, Vikinger played EBVuff at home. I don't know how much time we want to spend on this game. Vikinger just absolutely smashed them. The final score was 6-0. Vikinger they just look really solid, and it's very surprising to me how they just couldn't do something not necessarily similar, but didn't perform better in Europe. And maybe that has to do with the level of EBVuff more than anything else. But yeah, just pretty routine, I would say, victory for Vikinger. Pablo Puned played really well. He had 2 goals in the game. He was probably one of the men of the match for that game, I would say. Did really well. Did you get a chance to watch any of that game?
Yeah, I tuned in to the second half after the Kawa game. I saw that the score was already 3-0 at that point, right? 2 or 3-0. So it was. I wasn't expecting a comeback. Let's
right.
let's say it like that. And Herman Redason, the manager of EBUF, came out afterwards and said he was proud of his players. He said maybe it sounded silly, but I think they did well. And I think there was a few players that maybe should be a bit disappointed with their performance in this game. But yeah, I think it was just one of those games that Viking could just walk through, and no Europe, like we talked about before, so they don't have to rotate as much as Breiðablik or Kawa. So full strength team just hammering EBVuff. And
can you see them dropping the title at this point? Like, for me, I just think it's theirs.
Yeah, it's really hard to see them. But like I said, the only way is that it will get a bit tight after the split if they have to play Breiðablik and Valur and whoever else is there in the top 6, get in a bit of, get some in, God forbid, some injuries or something, or just, lose 2 in a row. Like, you never know. It's a little bit harder than it has been in the past years where it wasn't the split. That's the only scenario that I'm seeing them losing this, is them just getting very unlucky and running into some bad form after the split. But yeah. No, there's no.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't really seen Vikinger put a whole lot of goals past anyone this season, and so for them to put 6 past EBVuff, I don't know if that says more about EBVuff or if that says more about Vikinger. I would probably say the former, and EBVuff I think they're really struggling right now. And I don't know. After the break is going to be really interesting to see what ends up happening with them, because you're right. Like, the coach came out with his comments. He was proud of his team, blah blah blah. But they just are struggling to get results right now, which I think is a problem. That being said, their last few games, they played Breiðablik last round. They drew with Keflavik. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think about EBVuff?
Yeah, I mean they have some games in the last 5 rounds. Home against Stjarnan and Fylkir and KR. They've been a bit better at home. Mm-hmm. Like you said, before they played Breiðablik and Víkingur, they had 3 decent games at home. They beat KR and Fram. They drew against Keflavik. So it honestly could just be that we just need to take these games against the top 3 out of the equation. Especially for the teams towards the bottom. No,
that's a fair point. Do you think that we're going to see them strengthen at all during this window? Do you think they need to?
I mean, they strengthened a bit in the winter transfer with
a couple Jamaicans.
Yeah, exactly, and then Oliver Redason from FH was a pretty exciting signing. He hasn't maybe kicked off as much as they would have liked him to. And I mean, they had Guy Smith from Valur and players like that, and like you said, the Jamaicans as well.
Right.
I don't know if they can afford much more than that, but yeah, I mean, like you said, Vikingur don't score that many, and you also have to take into account that the 5th and the 6th goal came after this red card to Elvis, which was a bit of a, you could argue, was a bit of a rough red card. He just sort of instinctually put his hand up as the ball was essentially in the back of the net, and red card and a penalty already at 4-0 is maybe a bit rough.
Yeah.
But I guess the rules are the rules.
Yeah, no, this is true. All right, well, any other thoughts on that game?
No, like I said, let's see how EBUF do after they get past this the Trident of power, or whatever we want to call them.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that.
Let's see how they do against the normal teams. Because this weekend coming up, this upcoming weekend is called Vestmannahelgi, which is like the biggest party weekend in Iceland, especially in Vestmannaeyjar, from where IBF is from. There's a huge concert and a big party. So let's see how they come out after that weekend. If they can come out fighting, or if they're hungover from the beer and the loss.
Well, they're playing FO next, I believe. So that'll be.
I think they play Stjarnan.
Oh, do they play Stjarnan
at home this weekend?
Oh, okay.
And then FO after that.
Gotcha. All right. 3-point gap from IBF to Fram. Just mention that. 7-point gap down to Keflavik. So, yeah, interesting to note. All right, there were 2 games today. Keflavik was at home against FO, and then Kaur hosted Valor. And yeah, we'll talk about the Keflavik FO game, and then we'll save the best for last. So FO found a way. They beat Keflavik 3-2, and they had a 2-0 lead going into halftime. And then, as we've seen in recent matches, FO just, I don't know, they just let it slip, and Keflavik came back and they made it 2-2. And unlike the Stjarnan game, FO found a way to win instead of losing in the last few minutes of the game. So that made me a happy camper. Bjorn Daniel with 2 goals, 2 really key goals. He opened the scoring, and then he got the winner late. So really good game from him. Impressive comeback, I think, from Keflavik. But if we're going to be honest, FO just made 2 really, really dumb errors. They gave the ball away really poorly on the first goal. I don't even know who he was trying to pass to. Goalkeeper passed it up to the defense. Defense, I think he saw the man coming, and he just kicked it up the field and kicked it right to Keflavik player, and it was 2 passes, and then they scored for the goal. So sloppy giveaway, a mental lapse, I guess, which I think we've seen a couple different times. I don't know if it's the youth in the team that's maybe causing this, maybe lack of experience, or if it's bad luck. I don't know what it is, but it's got to stop, because on the second goal, again, just kind of really sloppy play, a giveaway, and yeah, it resulted in the equalizer for Keflavik. And at that point, I was fuming, what is going on? But we showed a little bit of resolve, which I think was really good. We also subbed in 2 of our new guys, which, I don't know, they didn't have too much of a hold on the game, I would say, in the end. But yeah, got the 3rd goal and then held on for the win. So FO taking all 3 points, as they probably should. And Keflavik, I just think they're in a really tough spot. I think it's positive that they showed some fight and showed the resolve. I think that's a good thing on their end, and they need to keep doing it. They did the same thing against Vikingur earlier, a couple match days ago. But yeah, they just not able to find a way to win, and I think that's really proving to be difficult for them. So
yeah, it's just the story of their season, right? They just kept Keflavik it up. I mean, it's the same pattern as against Kawa last week. They score and they concede immediately, and the fact that they've scored 9 goals now in the last 4 games, and they have 2 points to show for it. That's not good enough. I know that they have, like we said a bunch of times this season, they've had their spine ripped out. They've lost so many players, but you can't score 9 goals in 4 games and get 2 points out of that. You need to be better than that.
Yep, definitely.
They're going down.
Yeah, I don't hold a lot of hope for them. That, for the time being, puts FL back up into 4th with 2-point lead over Stjarnan, so that's good. The other game today, Kaur hosted Valor. As we mentioned before, Valor coming away with a 4-0 win in probably the biggest game in Iceland, or definitely up there. This is a huge match, a very historic match, and I don't know what to say because I don't want to I don't know. Yeah, tell us, Tryggvi. Tell us your thoughts on this game. I saw a lot of the first half. I didn't see any of the second half, and from what I saw, it didn't seem like Kaur was getting run over. I think the scoreline maybe is a little deceitful, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, there were some issues with the Kaur defense, especially on that left side. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, it's not great. But yeah, if I can try to be a bit impartial and try to praise Valor in the beginning. I think they're just, this is a good team. And like the manager, Runar, came out after the game and just said we've been outclassed, where we met a team that's better than us. Simple as that. And they've now beaten Kaur 9-0 in total this season. And they, like I said, they are part of that top 3 best teams in the league. Maybe even pulling away a little bit with Víkingur to become the top 2 best teams. We'll see. They were just really, like, Kaur had a lot of the ball. But they couldn't threaten enough. The defense is holding really well. I think Hlynur Freyr is someone we should mention a bit more. Young, he's from 2004. Christ. That's young. Yeah, he's had a really good season. He's being played usually in this defensive midfield position, which is essentially sort of part of the back 3 kind of. He plays with the 2 central defenders, and he was actually pushed back into central defense after Elva Freyr was substituted off. He's just had a really good season especially for such a young kid. But even just take the age out of it, he's just had a really good season, and the whole Valor team are just having a great season. And the fact that they could bring on the firepower of Adamair and Andr Runar and others says a lot about this team. They just have the resources that many teams in this league don't. But yeah, Kaur, we couldn't really cope with it. Like you said, the left-hand side was really exposed. I think we were chatting on WhatsApp during the game, and I think it reminded me a lot about the first game against Víkingur this season. The one game I've actually been able to attend, because it seems like every time I go to Iceland, the Kaur games get moved around, so I can never actually go to a Kaur game. But this one time I managed to go, and we lost 3 or 4-0 to Víkingur. I don't remember anymore. 3-0, yeah. And it reminded me a lot of that game. Like, we had the ball, we were playing a lot better than we were back the beginning of the season, but still, like, we have the ball, but we don't really know what to do with it. We don't have that lethal striker that Valor does. And then most of the goals were just carbon copies of themselves, or at least carbon copies of every 70% of the goals that Valor scored this season. It was a ball to Birkimár or Tryggvi,
yep,
and or Adamair.
Yeah.
And then they cut back to Orrhap, not Aronio, Patrick Pedersen, whoever it was, is in the center of the
who's crashed in the box.
Exactly. And that goal was just cover tracks of that goal, essentially. Different variations of that goal. I don't want to critique too many players too much. I just think there was just way too much space down there.
Yeah.
On Kaur's left, it was just Tryggvi was actually shifted because he usually plays on the left, but this week he played on the right, exactly because of that reason. And yeah, it worked.
In this game, Atli picked up a knock. He was subbed out in the first half. Bit of a blow, I think. But have you seen anything about his injury? Do you know if it's severe? I mean, he walked off on his own accord, so hopefully it's not, horrible. And there may not be any information yet. I was just curious if you'd seen anything.
No, I haven't seen anything, but it's, that again speaks a little bit to the depth of Kaur. Before the game started, you could notice there was 3 18-year-olds playing in the starting lineup. Lucas Magni was given his first, or he's had some minutes. I don't remember if he's started before in defense. But sort of the back 3 was Jakob Frans, Finnur Thomas, and Lucas Magni, all very young players. And then, Benoni Breki and Johannes Kristin, the other teenagers. And, the players they brought on was, Rúrik Gunnarsson as well, who's also a very young player. So it's a bad injury because Kaur just don't have the manpower really to replace someone like Atli.
Yeah. It looks like Lucas was subbed in. It was like an extra time sub. He played like 3 minutes in that win against FO earlier in the month. That was it, though.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
okay, I hadn't started before. So yeah, that's so first start, and I think he was close to the first goal or to the second goal, and I think you can maybe criticize the defense for being young and naive, but especially Tryggvi goal where he could basically put the ball 5 meters in front of him in the center of the penalty area without anyone bothering him. But I don't think you can blame any of the defenders. To be honest, it was a team performance of just letting Valor do what they wanted.
Yeah, Valor. Yeah, they're looking good. They're still 6 points behind Vikingur, but now they're 4 points ahead of Breidablik after Breidablik's draw against Stjarnan. So expanded their advantage slightly, and they continue to fire. so looking good. Just before we wrap up this part and move on to some listener questions, I did want to go through kind of a new little thing that I think we're going to start doing, which is going to be the 3 stars of the round. And so between the two of us, we're going to try to pick 3 players that really stood out to us over this last round. So I kind of sprung this a little bit on Tryggvi. So I ended up choosing, for the most part, most of these selections this week. But we'll look to get back on track again this next week. So my selections, or I guess I should say our selections, were Pablo Punjed from Vikingur, again with his 2 goals, and then he had an 89% pass completion rate. So, he really bossed the midfield in that game and was a key for them, as he's been many, many times. We kind of debated a little bit over several players from Stjarnan in that, in their game against Fram, but also in their draw with Breidablik. Some really impressive performance. Heidar Egesson, Daniel Axdal, and Emil Atlasson they kind of shared the the star. They each got a third of the second star. Wow, does that make sense? But yeah, Emil Atlasson with the goal for Stjarnan against Breidablik, he played really well. He was kind of a busy bee all over the field. Heidar Egesson, I felt like he was really, really well in the defense against Breidablik, coming in with some really, really key tackles, chasing down the ball, put it in a really good shift. And then Daniel Axdal, I think, shared in that responsibility, kind of on the left side there of the Stjarnan defense. And, together I think they really just did well to kind of shut Breidablik off down that side. So those 3, I guess, kind of sharing in that second star. And then for the third one, yeah, I went with my homie, Bjorn Daniel Sverresson from FO, who today, with 2 goals, including the winner for FO in a game that they really needed to get some points after just a really bad, they've lost their last 3 games in a row. And so for them to be able to turn that around, I think was crucial. And he is not a player that we've talked a lot about. He doesn't tend to pop up with, I think, a ton of goals. But yeah, he had a really good game today. And so yeah, he was the 3rd star. So that'll wrap up part 1. And in part 2, when we come back, we're going to answer a few listener questions. And then in part 3, we're going to go over some transfers. And then we'll wrap it up. So we'll be back in just a second. All right, welcome to part 2. And in this section, we've actually had a few listener questions. We're going to run through them real fast. First question was from our friend, one of our good followers, who also does a lot of good work following not only the Besta, but also a lot of the lower divisions in Iceland. So definitely recommend following him. His handle is at Bestu Elettu. I probably totally murdered that. Tryggvi, you can say it.
Bestu Elettu. That double L is a killer in Icelandic. So
his question was, which players do clubs miss the most? What do you think?
Yeah, we talked about it, and we tried to, we have made a whole list of, 1 or 2 for every team. I think what we came up with is strikers are definitely a big miss. If you look at someone, like Coward, I think could definitely use, whether it's Kjartan Henry or maybe Stefan Lubicic, who scored against FO today, right? I think someone like that, and even like for FO, not exactly a striker, but Mattias Williamson, who scored a goal and almost scored two in that dropping of IPVAF, and Nökkvi Þórisson as well for Kawa. Like these sort of strikers and it just makes sense, right? Like strikers are the hot commodities of the transfer market, so it's those sort of players that get sold out of the leagues, especially the Besta, deildin, and even Breiðablik as well. Like, not that they've been playing badly, but imagine Breiðablik with Isak Snær, who's now in Rosenborg. That would be quite a challenge to come up against a team like that. But I guess the other aspect is maybe defenders. They might not be the biggest names, but Elva Freyr, for example, if we keep on Breiðablik, he's playing well for Valur. I think he's had a pretty, maybe not the most spectacular season, but Breiðablik has been struggling a bit in defense. That if we just look at the two games against Hauka, right, would someone like Elva Freyr help them? And then you have to have that same for other players, other teams. Sorry.
Yeah.
Even like Hauka, they had a senior Brazilian defender, Bruno Soares, who was in the team of the first division last year, and his contract wasn't renewed. What if keeping someone like that? So I think that's the main two themes we got.
Yeah, one other one I think too that we wrote down, that you wrote down for Vikingur, like Crystal Mani, right? Like he has now moved on from Rosenborg. He really didn't have a great first half of the season there, and now he's playing in the Danish first division. But as you wrote, right, like him combined with Nikolai Hansen, I think could have been like a crazy combo.
Yeah, and then if you go to Stjarnan, it's you can just start listing off half the team of the last few years, and it's
exactly.
I think every year you can probably list like 4 players.
Yeah,
that they could use.
Yeah, no, good question. Thanks for the question. We also got another one, and he's asked us before, and we just didn't get to it in one of our other shows, and so I apologize about that. So his handle is Riki Arna 1809. And he asks us, how would K.I. Klaksvik do in the Besta? Well, this is a really good question because neither of us really watched the Faroese League, to be honest. But I think there's been a lot of hype around Klaksvik because they in Champions League they dumped Ferencváros from Hungary out of the first round, and they are looking pretty good against the Swedish champs, BK Häcken, this round, and could potentially spring a surprise. I believe it was a 0-0 first leg draw in that one in Klaksvik. So how would they do in the Besta? Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't honestly know, but I'm just gonna venture out there and based on, so I did catch the second leg of their tie against Ferencváros, so I have seen 90 minutes of them in whole. So this is purely what I'm basing this off of. So there's the caveat, but I would say that they would be a top half challenger for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you've watched 90 more minutes than me. So I'm going to try to base this off sort of Faroese players in Iceland and Icelandic players in Faroe Islands. I think the leagues are definitely getting closer. Every time the national teams play each other, Iceland is still beating them, thankfully. But we haven't. But at the same time, we haven't played them with anything at stake. Really, I think it's been mostly friendlies, so you can't really take that super seriously, because the Faroese have done really well competitively. The Faroese players that come to Iceland, they're not all just Simon, like the from Bundesliga sort of players.
Right.
You also have Clement coming to Breiðablik straight from the Faroese League and doing really well. Mm-hmm. And then you have Hallur Hansson, who was at Coward, who is now I think he's now in Klaksvik on the bench. He had a terrible injury last season. He was definitely a very high profile signing for Coward last season, and now he's at Klaksvik, so that would indicate a pretty similar level, right, to between these. So I think it's definitely getting closer, and hopefully we can have an Icelandic versus Faroese team in Europe soon. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and I would just add also, I think Gunnar Vattenhammer at Vikinger. I think he's another player that's come over from. He's a Faroese player playing in the league, and he's done really well for Vikinger this season. And I believe they signed another one as well. I think there's 2 Faroese players at Vikinger at the moment. The other one is not coming to mind, but yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's a fair assessment. All right, well, yeah, thanks for the question. When we come back in part 3, we are going to talk about transfers. So this is going to be really exciting. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back. In part 3, we are going to talk about transfers. The transfer window officially opened in Iceland, as it has in much of the world, and there's been a lot of updates going on, a lot of moves, even since our last show, which was only a few days ago. I think we'll start off with probably the biggest news. We've talked several times about this transfer ban that FA was under, and it has been lifted. That came out Friday, maybe, or I think it was late last week, if I'm not mistaken, that it had been lifted. So, like, one of the big questions is, well, why? And so, Tryggvi, fill us in, fill the listeners in. I mean, I followed this, you followed this. Give us your take.
Yeah, I think we're still trying to parse this. There's been a lot of talk in the media today and yesterday about this decision to lift the ban. So the ban originally came, or at least that's what we were told about how the ban came to be was that Morten Beck, who used to play in Cowhead as well, but was in FV a few years ago, between 2019 and 2021. So what we're told is that they owed him wages, and they were made clear that they had 30 days or until the 15th of July to settle up and pay what they owe him, which was the number being banded around back then was around 24 million Icelandic kroner. Now everyone is kind of trying to scramble and understand how and why this was lifted. From what everyone can understand, at least at the time of recording, is that FO sent in a letter to the Icelandic FA saying that the FIFA disciplinary code allows for these bans to be rescinded even after it's started, but doesn't really, in this letter, doesn't really say what part of it and how exactly why they should have this ban lifted. It just does say that they should be. And from what we know at the time of recording, it doesn't seem like they've paid anything. It doesn't seem like Morten Beck has been consulted. It's all very sketchy. According to this, it seems like they need to pay certain taxes or certain contract clauses, which account for like a few 100,000 Icelandic kroner, so not the 24 million, and some sort of fine for this ban. So it's a little bit up in the air, and it seems to be happen very quickly and very easily for FO, and they seem to be pretty confident because a few seconds after the transfer ban was lifted, 3 players walked through the door.
Yep, it was a funny announcement. If you're interested in watching it, you can find it on the FO social channels. They wrapped some tape around the fence to get into the FO facilities, and they had was it the director, maybe, I think, unlocking the gate, basically signifying that we're back. Like, the ban's gone, we have the keys, like, we're good to go. Yeah, a little bit of comedy, but I think they've received a lot of heat, maybe, and a lot of stick from this whole ordeal, and might continue to do so just because it's still really unclear, like, everything that's kind of going on. But you like to think that hopefully everybody's doing things in a fair and honest way, and I don't think we're suggesting otherwise. We're just trying to understand all the specific details from everything that's happened. So 3 new signings: Gredar from Kaur, Arner Bjord from from Vikingur, and Vidar Ari, it looks like he's coming in from Budapest Honved, which is a club in Hungary. 3 moves. We saw 2 of those players today. Gredar and Arnar Björk got time in the FL game today in the second half. They both came on at the same time, played all right, and then I think Vidar Ari, I think, is the one that I'm most excited about, if I'm being honest. No offense to the other 2, but I'm excited to see what he can do. He's obviously been a player that has a lot of experience outside of Iceland, which I think will be valuable for FL, a team that is very young and has relied a lot on that this season. And so I'll be curious to see what he can bring and how he can maybe mentor some of our younger players. And I just wonder if they might rely on his experience to maybe prep some of their players to maybe move abroad. I don't know. But yeah, 3 signings in one day. I don't know how often that happens. So that was exciting for me anyways, and other FL fans, I'm sure.
Yeah, so the Arnor Borg is only on a loan from Vikingur.
Correct.
But yeah, Gretas Knight has not been getting a lot of game time with KR. I think he was injured last season, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right. Yeah.
But yeah, hasn't gotten a lot of game time this season. Also partly about injury, but yeah, it seems there's been a talk about this transfer being locked up for a while now. So yeah, like I said, there's some confidence that things will be solved.
Yeah.
But yeah, it will be interesting. Vidarari hasn't been in Iceland for a few years now. He had a very good season with, was it Sandefjord?
Sandefjord.
Yeah, he had a very good season back in 2021 with Sandefjord, where he scored 11 goals, 13 goals in all competitions, which is quite rare for him. He was never a goal scorer, but he went on a tear, and he got some interest, and that's partly why he ended up moving to Hungary. But I think he's only scored 1 goal in the Besta deildin so far, so he'll be looking to add to that tally. But no, good signing for
yeah, because he had a brief spell with FL. I think it was a loan move at one point in time, and so I think that's where his 1 goal came from. And then he obviously liked his time there, and now he's coming back, so that's exciting. In other moves outside of FL, so another good player departing from the league and from Stjarnan. Everybody calls him Guma, so I'm going to call him Guma. Nokvason. He has left Stjarnan. He's moved to Mjölby in Sweden. I think that's a really interesting move. Mjölby, so this is their 2nd or 3rd season in Allsvenskan, and they can play some good ball, and so I'm interested to see how he does, if he can break into the squad there with the time remaining in the season. I think he's moved to a club that has a really good manager. There's another podcast I listen to called the Nordic Football Pod, and definitely recommend that. They've spoken with the manager of Mjölby. I think that interview was last year for them, and so yeah, he definitely has a clear idea of how he wants to play, how he wants his team to play, and he seems like a really good dude. So hopefully it's a successful move for him.
Yeah, like we talked about so many times, it's another star boy moving abroad. The club came out and said they're really proud of being this successful in their exports, especially exporting straight to first team football abroad. It could easily turn into a club of selling them onto Valur, who sells them on, or selling them onto some youth team somewhere. But they seem to, at least so far, to be ready for first team football in the Scandinavian league. So that's a huge achievement for Stjarnan. It's the 5th youth player sold abroad in the last 3 years.
That's impressive.
That number will likely continue to rise, I guess, like we've talked about.
Star Factory.
At the time of recording.
That's right. Star Factory. It's working. There are 3 others that I think we wanted to mention. I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about them. I'm not familiar with any of them, really. But I think you might know a little bit more about at least 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, it's so another transfer from Stjarnan. So Sigurbergur Auki Jörensson. That's you should try to pronounce that.
Sigurbergur Auki Jörensson.
So that's a name and a half.
That is a name and a half.
I'm sure he'll get a nickname as well if he moves abroad. So he's
Aki.
so yeah. Aoki is a bit easier, but yeah, he's moved from Stjarnan to Haukau as a loan. Haukau needed a bit of reinforcements. Their player Ivar Orrikisurason has moved to. He's going to university in the States. I don't know which one. Maybe you can find that out. Look him up.
I should. It's funny that you mentioned that. Just brief side note. There's a player from Leiknir who is coming to the University of Dayton, which is not very far away from me. So I've thought about maybe popping up there to see if I can catch him in action. It'd be kind of cool. Anyways, sorry.
Nice, yeah. Should get him on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
So he hasn't gotten a lot of time with Stjarnan this season. I think he's only got a handful of games. But he was part of the U19 national team for the Euros earlier this month, so he's a very talented player, and a reason why he hasn't been sold. It's only a loan, but hopefully Haukau will definitely be hoping to add a bit of depth to midfield and defense where he can also play. And then we have two players that I don't know enough about. We have Jon Pereo Maki, sorry for the pronunciation, from Thor Akureyri to Fram. So Fram lost Albert Hafsteinsson to IA. So it's not a replacement, I think, as far as I can understand. Jon is a bit more defensive-minded, but it adds a bit to their midfield, and it's also a transfer that's been rumored for a while.
So he's a Spaniard, if I'm looking at this correctly.
Yeah, I think he's from the La Masia, from Barcelona even.
Oh wow!
So hopefully we can see some tricks, him linking up with Fredji.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then finally we have a player that came on off the bench for a few minutes in the FO game. It's Robert. I've seen it written as Hehedosh or Gegedosh. We need to get a better pronunciation guide for that. A Ukrainian striker. I think he's in his 30s. I think he's 30 or something like that. He last played in Malta, so he's a bit of a journeyman. But definitely they need some strikers up there in Keflavik. And I could see he was registered, at least on Fotbolti.net, he was registered as an assist for Sami Kamel's goal. So hopefully he can hit the ground running for them and help them out in the last few games.
Yeah, that's exciting. He didn't stick out to me when I was watching, but to be fair, that doesn't mean anything. so yeah, no, that's good for them. And yeah, if he's already got an assist, then that's even better. They'll definitely use a player like him. Yeah, so that kind of wraps up our transfer section and this episode as a whole. So Tryggvi, thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit and chatting.
Yeah, thanks for letting me vent about Coward for a little bit. It was nice.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, thank you listeners for listening to this episode. Again, if you want to find what we're doing, you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Besta English. And we're always interested to hear feedback. What can we do better? What would you like to see? We had somebody who mentioned the other day that they'd be interested in having like a WhatsApp group. So if you're interested in that as well, find a way to reach us. Comment on Instagram or Twitter or message us or whatever you want to do, and let us know if that's something of interest to you. But until then, that's bye from me and bye from Tryggvi.